I'm Anand Mecheri. I'm the founder and CEO of Invicara. Invicara is a software technology company. We provide a platform for creating digital twin solutions. Invicara delivers solutions across multiple geographies, and Ireland is our home base. So we've had the pleasure of supporting and working with CitA. So as a platinum sponsor of the CitA Tech Lab event, we are delighted to have this 30-minute opportunity to talk to you about digital twins. Rather than talking about Invicara and our platform, we thought it's a great idea and beneficial to the industry to bring together a number of experts from the industry and those who we work with. And in fact, we have today Declan Kelly from IPUT PLC. We have Anthony Condon from PJ Hegarty. We have Cillian Kelly from John Sisk. And we have James Murray from Invicara. So I'm going to quickly let the guys introduce themselves very briefly.
Hi, I'm a senior development project manager for IPUT. IPUT have a large portfolio of prime Dublin offices and logistics buildings as well around Dublin. All our property is based in Dublin, and we're working with all the people on the call here, pretty much, or on the panel, on a number of projects in Dublin at the moment.
My name is Anthony Condon. I'm the BIM and Digital Construction Manager with PJ Hegarty.
My name is Cillian Kelly. I'll be Head of Digital Project Delivery in Sisk, and I was working with Anand and Declan and the team on Wilton Park and using the, I suppose, Invicara services. So
I'm James Murray, Commercial Director for Invicara, and I'm responsible for developing business in Ireland and the UK.
Thank you all, gentlemen. So back to the topic of the day. We're going to talk. It's really a digital twins one-on-one session. We want to try and focus around why do we do digital twins? Why do asset owners need a digital twin? We're going to talk about what does it take to pull it together. Because when we talk about digital twins, the general perception is that it's something esoteric, and we want to try and achieve today in the next 30 minutes to try and communicate that a digital twin is an extension of what new developments are anyway doing around BIM and how BIM contributes to great outcomes in producing an operational strategy leveraging data and graphics. So having said that, I'm going to quickly dive into a few questions, and I'm going to try and direct it to our expert panelists here. Let me start with Declan. So Declan, as an asset owner, as a developer, can you share, how important is it to get a digital handover or a digital twin at handover? Would be great to start with you on that.
Well, I think in a way, the question is premature for me in that we're working on it. We haven't got there yet. But in IPUT, our focus is on smart, sustainable buildings. And what we did is with yourselves on one of the assets that we had recently completed, we had a traditional set of O&M handover documentation. And we worked with Invicara to create the digital twin retrospectively. And I think during that process, we understood that the workload in transferring it was massive. It was much more than we anticipated. It took longer than we anticipated. But what we got at the end of the day, albeit it's not quite the model that we intend to get on other projects, it has made life much easier for our building manager on that job. What it does for him on a day-to-day basis, really, it gives him access to all the information that he needs. So if he has a problem somewhere, not alone he can see it on the model, he can see it in the BIM model, he can assess valve location, say on the mechanical system. He can also search the model in various ways that were much more difficult to do in the traditional documentation that he got. And what we also found in working through the transition was there were a lot of gaps in the information we got in handover. And I think the process that we have now for producing the information and the digital twin that we'll get at the end of the current projects will be a much higher quality for our building managers. And also, I think for ourselves, we also hold on to buildings and we refurbish them in 20 years down the line. And for any works that a tenant might want to do or that we want to do again, it just gives us a great platform to work off.
Absolutely. So I think your key point there is, especially with your experience of having transformed an existing building into a digital twin, you probably felt the opportunity to get that as a natural outcome from new developments. Would that be fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. We definitely see the benefits. I think what we have discovered through the projects we're involved with, say with Cillian and Anthony, is just the journey in getting that understanding of, one, what exactly we want, and two, getting that message across the contractors, as well as getting the most efficient way to pull it together.
Thank you, Declan. James, would you like to add something to that?
I think it's interesting that Declan refers to the gaps that occurred. I mean, I think digital twin is critical for any client like IPUT, because they have, from the first day they start operating their building, they have all the information required. There is no gaps. It's easy and accessible, and it helps the maintenance team to be efficient. They have access to their key specification, commissioning, performance data, plus all the associated owner manuals. And plus they know exactly the location where an asset is. So that type of operational information, this makes it so much easier to run any asset. And that is better. And as a problem, again, it's swift, it's easy, it's fast, and it will reduce the cost of actually operating a building, which is very important for the owner. And from a benefit point of view, is the real delta they've been able to leverage the kind of the asset twin and what we call an operations twin.
You start with a good outcome at handover, and then that sets the paths to integrating operational information into the twin, and try and have that single pane of glass view of how not just the single asset, but how the entire portfolio is performing. Shifting on to the delivery side of things, let me kick off with you, Anthony. Why is BIM the right starting point, and why? I mean, of course, BIM has tremendous benefits for development in general, but from a digital twin perspective, why is BIM a great starting point? Would be good to have your views.
By getting the model before you broke ground, it allows you to basically assess where the gaps are and essentially de-risk the project for later stages. It allows you to basically interrogate, is the data there? Is the quality of the data good, or does it need basically some remedial work? It's a good starting point, as in we get basically a digital model long before you get an actual physical building.
And why do you think it's a good starting point for digital twins? Because there's always this question: do we really need a BIM model to get a digital twin? So how would you react to that question?
Well, the BIM model will allow you to address issues earlier in the course of a project than you normally would if they were a traditional 2D job. So you basically get to see the architect's model, the consultant's models, and you're able to see where exactly the model stands from a point of view of coordination, from design, how advanced the design is. You're able to start pulling data out of the model a lot quicker than you traditionally would have been with just 2D drawings. Right. It also allows you to address, to change your focus a bit, where you kind of start with the end. So you can, before you break ground, you can start addressing and saying, well, at such and such a date in the future, we're going to hand over an actual physical model, a virtual model, and a set of O&Ms, and you're able to start addressing those issues from the start. So to break it down into smaller bite sizes to attack, rather than having to do it as one big task.
Yeah, we've all heard of this saying, trying to boil the ocean at the end. Doesn't work well, does it? Cillian, what are your views?
In terms of a BIM model and why it would be important, as a starting point, it sets the foundation of a digital twin in terms of the central point for all that information. If it's set out at the start, what we want to have in terms of the level of detail and level of information for the model at handover, that gives a clear understanding for both the design team, then the main contractor and supply chain, as to what we have to do in order to deliver that physical or the digital asset. If you were to do a digital twin without the BIM model, you're going to have to do a lot of re-engineering, gathering information from different sources, like that, whereas the BIM model would do that for you. So really, by setting out clear objectives at the start, that you develop your asset information requirements. You have clear understanding to your model production delivery table in terms of the level of detail of your models. That gives everyone a clear understanding as to how the model will be built. And then right from design stage through construction into operations, everyone knows what information they have to input into the model. And then you have an agreed deliverable at the end. So the BIM model, it's a crucial point to get right at the very start in terms of deliverables. And then it really speeds up the whole process when you're going into that operational stage, that you have all that information in a structured central location in the form of a BIM model that can be linked into the likes of Invicara as the platform that would be used as a digital twin solution.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess there's also the converse aspect to that, right? So if a project is kicked off with BIM expectations being limited to production of coordinated drawings, you're not going to get a digital twin in the end, right? So you're not going to be able to use that model to produce a digital twin at the end. So it's really, really important what you both shared there, Anthony and Cillian, that it's critical that to start with the end in mind and have a clear strategy for information management. And that's the only way we're going to get that outcome. Yeah, great, thank you. I'm going to shift back to Declan now, and from a client perspective, from an owner perspective, what data is important? I mean, we talk about, there are different schemas like, COBie, of course, everyone's aware of. It's a vast amount of data sets that is defined under that schema. You don't have to pick everything, but there is a wide definition of what information could be produced. We have, in working with yourselves, we have obviously over the last 3 years, we have matured our thinking around, what information do we really need? How should it be produced? Should it be in the model? What should be in the model? It'll be great for everyone to sort of hear your perspectives directly from you as to how you think an owner should set out these expectations to make it, meaningful, at the same time realistic for the supply chain.
How we developed it through the last year or two working with yourselves, Anand, was we learned to listen to our building managers, and from the retrospective digital twin that was produced, the day-to-day use of that, the benefits of it, what worked, what didn't work, and we put that into our thinking. We also tied in with our asset services team as to what they want and what they didn't want. And I think while we have the setup in the model being a key document with the tagging, with the searchability function, and the whole thing structured very well, some of the discipline that we had to put on things was between ourselves and yourselves, getting enough information, but not too much information. There are certain elements that we do not need all of the internal doors in a high level of BIM. We need the original model data, and everything else is tagged from there. Everything is searchable. And we got a lot of feedback as well from the FM side, in that we talked at one stage about having all of the light fittings having a unique ID. But ultimately, that's not the way it's serviced. That's not the way it's done. There's no value in that. So we pulled back from that based on our in-house experience, and putting that message, I suppose, down the line to the supply chain. I think what is going to be interesting going forward again is bringing the FM supply chain on board, the tools for servicing for the guy coming in doing the lift. He has to do everything on the iPad that's tied back into your platform. And at any point in time, the O&M manuals, the maintenance information is up to date. That is where we want to be with this. The diagnostics is the next stage. It's down the line. It's not something we've thought about yet, but that's where we've developed, and that's the level of information that I think we've become fixed on and got common now between the live projects we have. And the only time that we'll, I suppose, review that again will be one. We have some 10 and 10 put on some projects at the moment that they may have a different view on life. And when we're a year or two down the line on these projects ourselves, and we get feedback from the guys on the ground.
It's a journey, isn't it, Declan, in the end? I mean, there is a lot of learning along the way. And as digital, for most people, digital tends to be something that they believe would be a light, a turn off, turn on kind of a thing. But it's really not. I mean, you start peeling away, you're peeling away at it. And as you experience it, you recognize there is so much more you can do with it, or you need to adjust. So it's a bit of a journey, and IPUT as a organization, you have been early adopters, and I think that's critical to you can't really get to that end point unless you're on the journey, and you started the journey 3 years ago, and you're seeing already the benefits from that. That's fantastic.
Going to continue, I think, Anand. That will continue. It will continue to evolve, and
Yes.
and that's the way I think I see this going.
I think there's another really important point that the world is certainly moving away from single big enterprise systems to manage everything to a network of systems, apps, so to say, that work off a common database or a common data model. And that's really the power of how the digital twin is going to be brought to bear, to be having that single point of reference where all information flows in. Any application, any workflow that you want to implement has immediate access to the right data sets. Yeah, so it's a phenomenal time in terms of how the industry is beginning to leverage data, leverage BIM for a meaningful operational strategy. Thanks for your inputs there. Getting back to a little bit more of back to the delivery side of things. Classification is talked about a lot, right? Classification of models, classification of model content. It's still not very well understood by most practitioners. So, Cillian, do you want to outline why classification is so important in models?
You make a good point, Anand, in terms of its classification. It could be open up a can of worms sometimes when you start mentioning classification on projects and inputting classification into models. And if they're kind of going at a high level saying we want Kobe, we want Uniclass, but then they don't specify what parameters they need or what assets do they need. And as Declan mentioned, like that, you have to have a practical approach in terms of getting classification and gathering information. So look, it becomes I suppose critical on a project at the start that you go through your asset information requirements and you look at the classification and the attributes that you're going to collect throughout the project, and assign responsibility to the design team and main contractor supply chain as to who will gather that information, because it could become I suppose a big issue down the line on a project if there's models that we don't have the correct classification or information as per the asset information requirements. It's going to be additional work for your main contractor and your supply chain that wasn't accounted for. So it becomes critical, and because essentially that's what the client needs at handover in terms of how they're going to operate and manage their facility. And it needs to be gathered throughout design, construction, and operations to really have that, I suppose, rich model at the end for handover for operations and the operations team. So it's definitely it's critical to get it right at the very start and set your deliverables and responsibility across your team. Everyone agrees with, signs up to it, and understands what that means for them in terms of inputting the information, because it might be an additional person on the project to input that information that they mightn't have accounted for. So there's additional resource that you have to make sure that you've allowed for that in terms of your scope of works, and that you can deliver your package in terms of the 3D physical model, but also then the asset information with your classification along with your attributes as well. So
a good analogy I normally provide for this is if you're a logistics company and you have implemented an ERP and you have your inventory codes, but imagine your inventory doesn't have barcodes for somebody to read it and understand, for your systems to understand what it is. A human can obviously pick up a piece of asset and read its label and figure out what it is. But if a machine has to understand something, it has to have a definitive way of understanding that content. So in a way, classification is like a virtual barcode inside your design model. And if you don't allow machines or pieces of software to understand what's in your model, it becomes very hard to try and connect data. So because not all data is going to be in the design models, it's going to be produced in equipment schedules, it's going to be in documents. How do we connect everything? How do we make it an integrated information model and not information silos? So it is hugely important, and I think your experience in delivering information like that with classified models is going to be really important to get communicated. And people's and general expectations should be that models are not just for producing drawings, but for producing data. And if it's about producing data, then it's classification, knowing what's inside, becomes really important. Anthony, maybe you have some additional perspective.
Yes, I suppose, look, one of the things that we see with it is it's vitally important that like from classification, all forms of data, be it drawings, schedules, specs, are managed like during the thing. I think one of the things that needs to be explained on projects to everyone is the importance of it and why it has to be done. And basically, when you get into a project, you'll have your tier 1 contractor and let's say your tier 2 subcontractors. It's explaining the importance of this data to your whole supply chain, because you can explain it to someone, but you can't understand it for them. You have to get down at to the nuts and bolts and explaining to people why this classification is important and how it actually relates to how the systems work and things like that.
Thanks for that. I'm going to stick with some of the concerns and challenges. So maybe do a quick round with everyone. You've all had experience in delivering data now on a number of projects. So just the most significant challenge that comes up in your mind, and how would you think the industry should address it? So let's start with Declan. So what's the one challenge you have seen, and how should someone address it? It's a rapid fire.
I think the biggest challenge I would see in the delivery of the information would be setting out the parameters, the roles and responsibilities, and ensuring there's quality checks and audits at each stage to ensure a smooth delivery of the digital twin from the start. It has to be set out from the start.
I just have to echo on Declan's point. Really, like that's look, we're close to a project, and it's setting out the deliverables at the start and just making sure that everyone understands their requirements from each discipline and what that intakes, and just documenting it in your asset information requirements, and then essentially as a main contractor that we would develop a BIM execution plan to give guidance to the supply chain as to how we want them to deliver that information. If you don't have your deliverables set out in your asset information requirements, and you don't have your deliverables in your BIM execution plan, there will be disputes down the line. So you will have a lot of challenges. So by having clear and precise documentation that sets out your digital strategy in terms of your asset information requirements, BIM execution plan set out at the start, then you should be set up to, I suppose, mitigate and to avoid those challenges and risks that you might have. But yeah, it's just echoing again the point that Declan would have been saying.
I totally agree with the guys. I mean, from our perspective, is trying to get designers and subcontractors to understand the importance of data. Their focus is on getting the thing built. They think data is not relevant, but the reality is it's really important for the whole operation side. And that's a difficulty that we've had. And actually, it's not that challenging, but there seems to be resistance and somehow to get over that. And from an Invicara point of view, the earlier we start, so all the deliverables are outlined, so everybody knows up front. So as well as the designer and subcontractor knowing what they got to do, they know exactly what the deliverables are, and that will make the project so much easier.
I suppose education of the supply chain is one of the challenges I currently see with it. A lot of, let's say, your subcontractors and suppliers may have been asked to do COBie before, and they may have been asked to do it where it's very onerous on them, where like you have to do a bit of education with them to explain that, like, this is what I'm looking for, why I'm looking for it, and it doesn't involve a bit of education of your supply chain as to what they're being asked for, when they're being asked for it, and how they're supposed to deliver it, like, I suppose, like that. Again, it boils down to people, process, and technology.
It's the skill shortage, because it is new, and it's a new process that I suppose it isn't typical for design teams or supply chain to start inputting information into a model. So definitely the skill shortage and training, it's a big point there. So
if I were to quickly sort of summarize everything, the points that you made, what you said was start early, define things up front so everyone understands the deliverables. Don't make it too onerous, define the minimum requirements so it makes sense. Test and validate all the time, continually. Don't try to boil the ocean at the end. And develop a strategy that's really not just everything in the model, but make use of model data as minimally required, and then link it up with the data that's produced in schedules, in documents, to create an associative information model or an asset twin, so to say. I just want to round it up by saying an asset twin is something which is a digital manual of the facility, something that gets produced as should be produced as a natural outcome of any new development. But then it also becomes the basis for developing the operations twin. The operations twin would be an asset twin coming alive, so to say, where information from the BMS systems, the IoT systems, the maintenance systems, they all connect in a network of systems environment where the building manager, the maintenance teams, everyone has access to all the context. We touched upon functionality like diagnostics. How do you quickly determine what's the root cause for a problem? If you don't have all the right context, you couldn't really get that information. How do we optimize energy? How do we understand what's the occupancy of the facility versus the air quality versus the energy cost, and how the building management system is actually balancing all of that? In the COVID environment, there is this need to create more air changes to keep the environment healthy, but you also want to make sure that your energy cost is not going through the roof. So you want to have that optimal balance. And you also want to consider sometimes the risk of bringing in external air when there is pollution outside. There are certain environments where you have that challenge as well. So you need a lot of different data points to really optimize your building operations strategy. So essentially we're talking through a journey here, even in terms of maturity of digital twins, starting with a good expectation being defined, working through the projects to create a good validated data set in the BIM process, using that to connect information produced during construction and commissioning, and creating that asset twin as the basis for integrating with the operational systems. It also means that the operational systems, whether it's a BMS or IoT, they need to be properly specified so they're integratable. There are buildings where systems go in which are not integratable because the contractor was not told what the expectation was from an integration perspective. So there's a number of things to consider. The good thing is there is growing interest in the industry. Digital twins are no more fictional or aspirational. There are clients who are actually getting these outcomes today. So that's the great news, and we are making progress as an industry. On the 23rd of this month, there's going to be a digital twin day at the CitA Tech Live. There are a number of really interesting speakers who are going to talk about it. And Invicara will be presenting with Kingspan. We are going to unveil our first operations twin that is now being deployed at Kingspan's Innovation Center Icon, and we're going to showcase that on that day. So I would welcome everyone to join CitA Tech Live all the days, Monday through Friday. But the 23rd is the digital twin day, and do join us. Thank you very much for participation, and I appreciate the panelists, Declan, Cillian, Anthony, James. Thanks very much for joining. Appreciate your time.